the stakes are very high in what we do, and that the decisions that we make are profound decisions that have lasting impact for us and for the people around us.
If an officer shoots a suspect in the course of his job and that person dies, it's still considered a homicide.
Police officers have a very unique job. They go out and risk their life doing it, and then after they have done it and done it well, they have now become a de facto suspect in a felony crime.
It's important for the public to understand the way our system is structured and what the dynamic is in officer-involved shootings.
When I first started working with police officers involved in shootings, there were things I began to notice right off the bat, even though I really didn't know a whole lot about police operations. As I would talk to the many officers involved in these events, follow them through the investigations, follow them through the media response and the community questions, some things became clear. One is that we were expecting these events to defy the laws of physics. We were expecting these officers to defy the limits of human performance. We often expect them to have a perfect memory and make perfect decisions, when in fact research clearly shows that human beings are not capable of either one of those things. That the training and the judging of police officers is frequently based on myths, assumptions, and personal opinions that necessarily may not be true.
We've become such a video culture, and we rely on what we see in TVs and movies to such a great extent, often without even really being aware of it. There's a tremendous amount of misinformation out there, and to the extent that the public has that as context, it makes it very difficult for them to evaluate whether an officer has behaved appropriately in a use of force application.
This is a difficult thing for the agencies to overcome, trying to explain these events to the world at large who've been trained by Hollywood rather than what really happens.
Most officer-involved shootings unfold rapidly, very rapidly. In fact, our research tells us, and we've got video after video of officers being shot in a real-world encounter, that the threat can unfold as rapidly as a quarter of a second or less. And that is faster than any human being can react to a visual stimulus.
In officer-involved shootings, we have to never forget that it is literally the offender that calls the shots. Officers or anybody who is reacting to what another person is doing is always going to be behind the time curve.
Anyone who is assaulting an officer can assault them faster than they can react. Even if you're prepared, you understand it's about to happen, you can't deal with this type of speed of an encounter.
Patrol officers often are put in a reactionary mode because they're responding to a course of events, or they're responding to a person's behavior. Because of the inherent delay involved in the action-reaction dynamic, an officer is already put at a disadvantage.
Unlike the offender, the officers also have to be concerned about the public safety. So they are checking for their environment, checking for bystanders, and being concerned about their own personal safety. The offender is focused on one thing: can I assault this officer and get away with it?
Officers bring a number of tools in their toolkit to a conflict situation. And one of those tools is good communication skills, and in particular, persuasion.
Most of the time, officers do, in fact, talk the person down. If you look at the research, only about 1% of all police calls for service result in any use of force at all. And of course, only a very small percentage of those actually result in the use of deadly force. So in 99% of the cases, officers are able to resolve situations peacefully.
And because of chemical issues, emotional issues, sometimes a variety of other elements, the person is unwilling or unable to listen to anything that the officer says. That means they're in control of the situation. They're the actors, the officer's a reactor, and the officer then has to respond to what the person is doing.
So not all offenders can be stopped, not all offenders can be talked out of what they're getting ready to do, and sometimes it just happens, regardless of what the officer is going to do. At that point, the only thing that the officer can do is use force in an attempt to protect his life and protect the public.
It's not the officer's choice, usually, not to use verbal skills. It's the person being unable to listen or to attend or unwilling to what the officer is saying. Some people think that an individual who's armed with a knife is not a dangerous threat to an officer. And from our research, and certainly the research of others, we know that not to be true. Knives can actually be more dangerous than a gun. They don't have to be reloaded. They can be used at close distance. From our research, we know that a young person and someone who's in reasonably good shape can cover as much as 31 feet in the time span it takes an officer to draw a gun, point, and fire one round. Now, if the person is 7 feet away, the officer could even have the gun out in a low ready position. But by the time they raise the gun and fire, even once, they would be stabbed. And we know that a stab from a knife, or a stab or a cut, can be extremely quick. And each of those cuts or slashes can occur at less than a quarter second per stab. And any one could be dangerous, could be lethal to the officer. Well, certainly there's a variety of less lethal munitions that an officer can bring to a situation, whether it be beanbags, sponge rounds, tasers, even impact weapons. And the idea is that these are all good tools, and they've got their place in an officer's repertoire or toolkit. But they should not be used in a deadly force encounter.
Police are trained not to kill people, not to taser people. They are trained to stop the threat. And unfortunately, use of less lethal and lethal force does not automatically result in stopping the imminent attack.
So officers do have an obligation to assess the situation and to use the appropriate levels of force so that it doesn't put themselves in any greater jeopardy, or other officers who are with them, or civilians who are nearby, or the community at large in general.
One of the things that I remember seeing on TV back in the days when I watched my cowboy heroes was I watched the Lone Ranger and Roy Rogers and Gene Autry shoot the gun out of somebody's hand or shoot the knife out of their hand. And what we know from a dynamic real-world encounter is an officer is, for the most part, unable to do that. Either whether it's shooting a knife or a gun out of the hand, shooting someone in the arm, or even shooting them in the leg. Officers do not have the capability of firing accurately and hitting accurately in a dynamic encounter. And so it's an unimaginable challenge that we're facing officers with if we make them shoot the gun or the knife out of the hand or shoot to wound. It just can't happen. It's one of those Hollywood myths that